Good getting internet. It has been 13 years since I recorded a vlog one morning. I think it was just about cats. And I find out not too much later that my father was found dead in his apartment. It was what I generally term as the beginning of my decade of hell. Turns out it was going to last longer than a decade. Didn't know that at the time. But it was the last decade that I lived in the United States. And I've lost many family members during that decade. Started with my dad, ended with my grandfather. Lost an uncle and my mother. Yeah, an uncle. Two uncles. No, one uncle and my father. Or one uncle and my mother in between as well. So 4 different family members. And I don't know how many of you have been paying attention to anything about my life whatsoever. I don't have any siblings or anything. So I've lost the majority of my family at this point. Not just the majority of my family, but the vast majority of the members of my family that I interact with. In fact, I occasionally talk with my aunt that made the quilt that's back here, and I talk with my grandmother. And also occasionally talk to, So, let me backtrack. So, the aunt that gave me this quilt, she would be my mother's eldest sister. That's the only part of that end of the family I regularly talk with. I'm not talking about just seeing them on Facebook liking each other's posts type of thing. I'm talking like actual conversations on the phone. It's my mom's youngest older brother is the only other member of her end of the family that's alive, not counting their respective kids and so on. And last time I spoke to him would have been on the phone. I'm pretty sure that was before I moved to Norway. In fact, I think that was after I received inheritance money. Yeah. No, it would have been... Yeah, the last time I talked to him on the phone would have been after spreading my mom's ashes and my uncle's ashes. Because the 2 of them died in the same year, and we decided to just combine spreading of ashes, because they both died shortly before the pandemic started, and yeah, you get the idea. And we spread my mom's ashes during the end part of my honeymoon, oddly enough. Creator and I got married, and after we got married, we both went back to the United States. We visited Boston, New Hampshire, and went down to New York City to spread my mom's ashes and say hi to my mom's end of the family. My father's end of the family, as mentioned, my mom's parents, I only met my mom's mother. She died when I was 16. My mom's father had died before I was born, so I have no way of knowing him whatsoever. I've seen 1 picture of him, basically, and that's it. No, I think 3 pictures. Father's side of the family, though. So, my father had, as I mentioned at the start, died 13 years ago today. My father's... So my father was the eldest of 3 boys. The middle child, he died in 1999 as well. Or was that 2000? While I was still in high school, at least. So 2000, 2001, somewhere around that area. I know it would have been before 2001. So probably 2000 or 1999. In either case, he had an accident when I was 6, I want to say. Yeah, it would have been 6. and suffered severe brain damage from it. So I didn't really interact with him too much as his original form, his original, like, intelligent, normal person. I have, like, one memory of him total. And the fact that I have any memory at all from the age of 3 is downright amazing. But I do have one memory of him, and that's it. My father's youngest brother is still alive. It's the only uncle and the only sibling of my father's on that side of the family that's still alive. My grandfather died shortly before I moved to Norway, because gotta have something terrible happen right before or during every single move that I've ever had. That's not actually true. It's just the last several moves that's happened. Yeah, actually, it's been quite a bit of the last several moves. I'm thinking about it. Say every move that I've had for the past 20 years. Anyway, so he died. It was an opportunistic infection. Like, my grandfather was in his 90s. It's not that surprising. My grandmother's been alone since then, so I've made sure to call her every week to say hi, make sure she's doing okay, have good conversations with her too, because I get really lonely as well. We actually have, my uncle bought her one of those Internet of Things photo frames. I can't stand that type of thing in general, just because why does a photo frame need access to the internet? But in this case, it's actually really helpful because all of her grandkids have spread throughout the world, basically. So, like, I have her closest of grandkids is living in, like, over an hour away, and then her other grandkids are multiple states, or in my case, a continent away. So we don't get to see each other very often, but we can upload photos from either our various travels or just day-to-day life or my cats. Including this one right here. Told you he likes the fur. So yeah, it's a way for us to share photos of our life with my grandmother. And also, I get notifications whenever any of those photos get uploaded, so I get to see my members of my family that I talk to maybe once a year. We all live very different lives. From my father's end of the family, I'm kind of a black sheep, sort of. So the rest of my family are very athletic, or at least used to be very athletic at various points in their life. And I'm the computer geek. I'm the nerd, I'm the role player, I'm the actor. Like, there is a very clear difference between me and the rest of my cousins. And in general, you can spread that throughout the rest of that end of the family. On my mother's end of the family, there are multiple people similar to me, but since we've been separated for such a long period of time, I have never, allow me to correct myself, I have only lived around members of my mother's end of the family for a short period of time twice. Once was before my memory. That would have been with some of my much older cousins. And once would have been while I was living in New York City, because then I was not too far away from my mother's mother and a couple of boroughs away from my uncle, both of which have passed. That was for a year and a half. The rest of the time, I lived half the country away from every member of my mother's end of the family. So in some ways, I'm a little less connected to them. I wish I wasn't. It's not like they're bad people or anything. It's just I never really interacted with them. They're not quite strangers, but they're definitely not just friends. And that's kind of a shame. It's weird that I'm talking about family when I'm on the anniversary of my father's death rather than talking about my father. So let me do a little bit of that too. My dad was also the black sheep of the family. On my father's end of the family, I'm definitely the most similar to him in most ways. Also inherited several of his physical illnesses just for fun. I am pretty certain my father is where I got both my depression and likely ADHD from. I'm almost certain on the ADHD part for my father. Neither one of us had ever been diagnosed, but my father was a drug user throughout the years of his life prior to me being born, and he always chased uppers, amphetamines of various varieties. Which, yes, that is somewhat common drug-seeking behavior. That is also a way for people with ADHD to calm their brain down and to be able to focus. And from what I have seen of my father and the things that we have similar to each other, it would not surprise me if that was the real reason why he was chasing uppers. I don't know for sure, though. He died well before I ever had this theory, and I never really talked to him about the drugs that he used. I mean, it had been in conversations. My mother was open about various illicit activities that the two of them had done throughout their years, but I never talked to him directly about it. Sort of. I actually have talked to a form of him. So, I've mentioned before that I have very vivid dreams. I am frequently a lucid dreamer. It used to be all of the time. As I've grown older, it's become more like 20-ish% of the time, including one recent very funny situation where I was in a dream with my partner, Kreter, and both of us in the dream realized that we were dreaming. Whether I was the person dreaming or my partner was the one dreaming, we weren't sure in the dream until eventually we figured out it had to be me. And I kept forgetting that I was lucid dreaming throughout the dream. It would be just going back to a normal dream and go, wait a second, I'm still dreaming. What am I doing? And then start lucid dreaming and then slowly forget that I'm dreaming again. Anyway, the point that I wanted to make is that my father is very frequently in my dreams, which is strange because my mother isn't. It's not to say my mother's never in my dreams. I would say that my mother is in my dreams maybe about once a month, and my father's in my dreams maybe about 3 or 4 times a week. Of the dreams that I remember. And as somebody who remembers apparently far more of their dreams than most other people, 3 or 4 times a week, my father being in my dreams is significantly higher than I would have expected. It's a interesting situation because usually I realize he's dead during the dream. And some of the time, that means that he just disappears from the dream at that point on. And some of the time, especially while I'm lucid dreaming, I get to talk to him. And sure, I know that I'm just talking to elements of my own subconscious or the random parts of random access memory that my brain happens to have at that moment that I start dreaming. So I'm not really talking to my father. My father is dead. His ashes are spread across the Atlantic Ocean being used as chum for fish. I mean, at this point, they're not even there. It's been a long time since we've spread them. So, still, the point is that he's chum for fish. He doesn't exist anymore. He's been dead for 13 years. But there's definitely part of me that's relieved that I can still talk to him from time to time. And then another part of me that realizes that I'm not talking to the version of my father that was at the end of his life. I'm talking to the version of my father that I remember the most, which is a weird concept. Like, my father, when he died, would have been 63? No. 61. Yeah, he wouldn't have turned 62 yet. So my father would have been 61 at the time. And my memory of him was more of him in his early 50s. That was the last time that I was really seeing my father on a routine basis, like once a week minimum, or working side by side with him, or lots of other things. I was interacting with him far more often. When I moved away from Florida, I would see him whenever I would visit Florida, absolutely, and heavily. My father, I stayed with my mother while that was happening, while I was visiting, and my father would be over every day or every other day type of thing. Because he missed me. I'm his only son. But that's different from I see him every week. That was the point where I started noticing he was rapidly aging. That would have been probably after I graduated. So in the roughly 5 years between 5 years, I can count, I swear, I graduated 2005, me. 8 years between when I graduated and when he died, he aged rapidly in that time. And I know a lot of it was because of depression. He was unable to find work because he ended up having a panic attack and nearly crashing his car and having to undergo emergency mental health care and all of that fun stuff, losing his job, not being able to get another job, and eventually going on Social Security early. And I know that affected him quite a bit. And also the fact that he was having heart attacks. That very rapidly aged him. He died from his second heart attack. His first heart attack happened while he was crossing a road. And, his hair went white. Keep in mind, I do have white in my beard. But he went from having roughly the same color of hair that I do to white with, he would have occasional gray hairs in his beard. That part's normal, but it was a bam, white. Unlike me, he actually had a hairline. His hair was, here-ish. But when he went white, it became very obvious how much he had aged. And I've mentioned this before. I'm really bad at judging people's ages, especially with my family, where no one in my family looks anywhere near their age. Never have, never will. My mother looked to be in her 40s until she died in her late 60s. My grandmother does not look to be 93, 94, 93, 92. In her early 90s. She does not look to be in her early 90s. She does look to be more like 70s at this point. But 70s, not 90s. There's a very large gap in between the two. But my father, on the other hand, would look very consistent in age until you look close to see all the bags under his eyes like I have right now, or his wrinkles, or things like that. But his facial hair and his head of hair did not change all that much outside of haircuts until the first heart attack and the graying of the beard a little bit before that. But then he went white and he looked tired. And I don't just mean tired as in he hasn't slept recently or has a history of not being able to sleep, but his body is straining to exist. This is one of the reasons why I've been so focused on trying to get proper health care for myself, because I do have extremely high blood pressure. In fact, I heard the news on Friday that the blood pressure and the heart doctors that I've been working with have basically given up on me and are referring me to a hospital for alternative means of medical treatment. Basically, I have not responded to the drugs that I am not allergic to. I have responded to the drugs I am allergic to, but I'm allergic to them. Or at least what my doctor called allergic. It's more that I have strong negative side effects from it. I am pretty sure that this is what my father would have gone through if he had actually had proper medical care and wasn't a smoker. I'm certain that his smoking actually killed him. It certainly pushed him over the edge. I don't want to get to that point. I want to live past the age of 62, thank you very much. It's dumb, I partially blame myself for my father's death. Not directly. It was definitely not my fault. And I was speaking with him on a fairly regular basis. I was calling him every week to every other week. I was actually calling him more frequently at that point because I was in the process of buying my house in Madison. And my plan was that I wanted to bring him up to Madison. Nominally because I wanted him to help me run networking cable throughout the house. That was more of an excuse project. I did want to do that, but I would have been perfectly happy with paying somebody to do it, and just I wanted him up so I can visit my dad. I would have space for him to stay, and he had the time. He had the willingness to go on a flight, or if he didn't go on a flight, he could take a train, which would cost more and take 2 days to get there, but it was possible. He didn't have any duties that he needed to do outside of taking care of his cat. So I wanted to say hi to him. So our plan was that my father was actually going to come up to visit me, and we had started making those plans. We hadn't ordered flights yet because I was waiting until after I had moved in, and the plan was once I move in, I'll pay for the flight. Dad comes up. We theoretically install networking stuff. In reality, we probably would have just had somebody come by to run the cables, and we might have just terminated them at the end. Something fairly simple that I could do myself, but it's nice to have a father-son project. And we had actually been talking through some of our plans about it the day before he died. The last time my dad died, I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday. And the last time I had talked to him was a Sunday. And for a while, I was actually wondering if I was the last person to talk to him, because my dad lived a very lonely life. He didn't really talk to anyone anymore by that point. Basically, his parents and his brother, sister-in-law, and their kids. That was it. He didn't talk to anybody else. Oh, and my mom. He would visit my mom every so often, even though they had been divorced for over 20 years at that point. He didn't make friends easily. It's a major difference between him and I. It's like one of the few things I ended up getting from my mom rather than my dad would have been charisma. Not literally Riz or anything like that, but the willingness and ability to just talk to someone. My dad didn't like doing that. For what I've been told, that was a more recent development. He used to be more like me. And over the years, I've stopped talking to people as often. It's one of the things that I'm working on with my psychologist, because we've identified a few areas that I need to work on that have diminished greatly as a result of moving to Europe. What I'm getting at, and kind of the ultimate point of this currently 22 minutes and 54 seconds of talk, is that I'm trying to avoid becoming like my father. My dad was definitely not a perfect person, not even close. I'm not a perfect person for that matter. My dad had some pretty major anger issues. That I am certain resulted in some very abusive behavior. Not physically abusive, more mentally abusive. And not very extreme in the abuse or anything like that. I want to be clear. My dad was not an abuser. Just tendencies toward that. Like, for instance, if he got frustrated, he would start raising his voice, shouting, slamming his hand on tables and desks and walls and so on to make loud noises. I don't know. I miss him dearly. I wish I can talk to him more than just the echo in my dreams. It's funny. One of the shower thoughts that I have is, what would I say if I went back in time 20, 30, 40 years and talked with my parents? Some of the conversations with my mom, some of the conversations with my dad. I know my dad would be proud of me. In fact, I am certain that my dad would have encouraged me to move to Norway sooner if he had thought that I was willing to do so. Hell, the moment that Trump became a theoretical possibility, he would have tried to come with me. But I know my dad would have been proud of me because he was proud of me back then. He was incredibly proud of me. It's one of the things that he had just stated offhand type of thing that he would brag to me with his coworkers and so on, but I also was one of his coworkers, and I spoke to them. In fact, I spoke to one of them after my dad died, so he can try to relay information to any of his friends that may have known him still about his passing. And that was a constant, was how much he talked about me, how much he would brag about me, or just say, the types of work that I'm doing in school, or the big fancy job that I got at a medical software company in Wisconsin. He was so proud of me and how far I've gone. So was my mom, for that matter. This isn't unique to my dad. I'm pretty sure most of my family was proud of me. That's how far I've gone. But it's nice to know your parents are proud, right? And he would still be proud. And jealous. Very jealous. My dad traveled the world while he was in the Navy. So, fun fact, my father was went into the draft. My father would have been, this was 1969, so my father would have been 18 at the time. Or 17 turning 18, I should say. And when he went into the draft, his draft number came up with a very low number, as in he would inevitably be drafted into the military to go to Vietnam. So his method of avoiding the draft was enlisting in the Navy, specifically focusing in electronics. The idea being that he wouldn't be a ground pounder at that point and have a much higher chance of surviving. And that was absolutely true. He ended up on an aircraft carrier. It is the same aircraft carrier that John McCain flew from and became a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton. It's the USS Forrestal, or sometimes nicknamed the USS Forest Fire or the USS Zippo, because it kept igniting from various accidents and so on. The sailors on that ship had firefighter training that was exceeding that of firefighters, because of how often they had to put out fires. But the U.S. Navy used the Forrestal for their goodwill ship. So the Forrestal was frequently going through the Mediterranean, through the North Sea, nearby coastal waters of allies and friends to drum up support for the United States government. So my father was able to sightsee quite a bit. I have photos of him from diving trips and from the Navy in Greece. I don't really have a lot of labels for them, unfortunately, so I don't really know. I have them all scanned. I just don't have labels for them. So he actually got a chance to travel quite a bit for being a city boy from West Palm Beach, Florida. Technically not originally born there, but close enough. And he had gone to China once while I was alive. And that was the only trip he had ever taken outside of the United States in the entire time that I was alive, because we couldn't afford it. International trips were expensive. They still are, but they were really expensive for being dirt poor back then. His trip to China was for a work trip, and he brought back a jade chess set for me. I still have said chess set, along with his chessboard that I inherited when he passed. He's the one that taught me chess, by the way. Or at least tried to. I think I've really learned how to play chess from playing battle chess and my uncle, who was a chess master. And we would play on a regular basis until I started regularly beating him. Then he stopped wanting to play with me. He was that kind of person, unfortunately. He liked board games. He taught me backgammon. Acey-doocy. He had the board game of Starship Troopers in his closet. He refused to bring it out to teach me, though, because it had so many pieces, and he kept going, it would take so long to teach and so on, and I never understood why he still had it. And eventually that box broke, because he was an indoor smoker, and boxes don't tend to survive long-term nicotine exposure, and all the pieces went everywhere, and I think he just threw out the game. It's kind of unfortunate. I think that game is actually quite valuable now. And also, it would have been something for me to do with him that wasn't computer-based. Yeah, this is a stream of consciousness video. I had no outline or plan for what I wanted to talk about. He shouldn't have died as young as he did. This is something that shouldn't have happened. And yes, he's the one that was ignoring doctor's orders. He was actually told that if he had continued smoking, he would be dead within a year, and he was, after his first heart attack, that is. But the reason for that wasn't his fault. My father had mental health issues, and he was unable to attain any mental health services, any help whatsoever beyond the initial panic attacks while he still had a job, and that was it. That should have never happened. A lot of the reason why I'm so pro public health care is because of the experiences that I've had with me, with my mother, and also with my father. Because my father was eligible for the VA. He did get health. VA, for reference, especially for people outside the United States, is the Veterans Authority. My father was a military veteran, and one of the benefits you get for being a military veteran that has been honorably discharged, which he was, is that you have lifetime VA healthcare. It's not the greatest healthcare in the world, especially with how often they keep cutting benefits to it, but it's publicly provided free healthcare. And my father wouldn't go. Partially because I don't think my father liked doctors, but partially because of how awful the Veterans Association was there in their healthcare. And he eventually needed to anyway because he couldn't go anywhere else when he had problems that absolutely needed assistance. I actually don't remember ever seeing my father go to a doctor. I know he did after I had moved out, but I never remember seeing it. The only doctors I've ever seen my father go to while I was living anywhere near him would have been eye doctors, and one time for a dentist. I think that if he had regular visits to a therapist, he would be alive today. I might not be using he, him pronouns for him at that point, because I'm pretty certain my father was trans. But he would still be alive today. And I should clarify the trans bit. I read some of his journals, his private journals. He was like me, where he would start writing a journal, get 3 pages into a notebook, and then stop. So they were very disparate. But these were private journals. This was after he died. And I have reason to believe that he was not entirely a guy. And that he was deeply in the closet over it. And I do keep referring to him as he because I don't know for sure. He's never expressed that to me at all, even though he knew that I probably wouldn't have had a problem with it. He's never expressed it to anyone that I'm aware of. So I will keep using he, him for my father because that's the way he told me to address him way back when. And that's the way I've always addressed him. If he had told me otherwise, I would switch, but he never did. I've been talking for almost 35 minutes, and I need to sleep. You can't tell from how closed my eyes are and I mean, admittedly, like right over that way is a light. It's not that bright, to be honest, but it is a bright enough light where I have to squint when I'm looking over here. Otherwise, I have to go like this. So, yeah, 35 minutes of me talking about my dad. I'll talk to you tomorrow, Internet. Later.